Now, my dog has stolen my slipper and my sock, so I'm walking this evening with one slipper on and one barefoot. Now, this is a sure sign that my local fae folk are running amok. Now, this story is probably the closest to my heart because it is literally my doorstep folk story. Llanfabon is now known to be up the mountain, just a 15-minute walk from my own home. But decades ago, a much wider area was known as the Llanfabon parish, and that certainly covers where I live. So this is my local story. So this is the story of the Llanfabon Changeling. At a farmhouse called Birthgron in the parish of Llanfabon, there once lived a young widow. She had a little boy whom she loved more than her own eyes. He was her only comfort, and she was afraid of letting the sun shine on him, as the saying goes. Pryderi, that was the name she had given him, was about 3 years old and a fine child for his age. At this time, the parish of Llanfabon was full of fairies. On nights when the moon was bright, they often used to keep the hard-working farmers awake with their music until the cock crew in the morning. On nights when the moon was dark, they delighted in luring men into desolate bogs by displaying false lights. Even in the daytime, they would play tricks on people if they were not very careful. The widow knew that the Fair family were very fond of stealing babies out of their cradles, and you can imagine how careful she was of her little treasure. She hated leaving him out of her sight by day or night. If ever she had to do so, she was miserable until she returned to him and found him safe and sound. One day, when he was lying asleep in his cradle, she heard the cows in the byre lowing piteously as if they were in great pain. As there was nobody in the house but herself to look after her precious boy, she was afraid at first of going out to see what was amiss. The lowing, however, became more and more agonised, and she became frightened. Not being able to stand it any longer, she rushed out, forgetting in her fright to place the tongs crossways on the cradle. When she got to the cowhouse, she was amazed to find that there was nothing whatever the matter with the cattle. They were chewing their cud placidly, and they turned their great meek eyes in mild surprise upon her, evidently wondering why she had burst in upon them so unceremoniously. Realising that she had been the victim of some deception, she ran back to the house as fast as her feet could carry her, and to the cradle. She was afraid of finding it empty, but bending over, she found a little boy in it who greeted her with "Mother." She looked hard at him. He was very like Pryderi, and yet there was something about him which made her think that he was different from him. At last she said doubtingly, "You are not my child." "I am truly," said the little one. "What do you mean, Mother?" But something kept whispering to her constantly that he was not her child, and as time went on, she became convinced that she was right. The little boy, after a while, became cross and fretful, unlike Pryderi, who was always as good as gold. In a whole year, he never grew at all. Pryderi, on the other hand, was a very growing child. Besides, the little fellow seemed to get uglier every day, whereas Pryderi had been getting prettier and prettier. At least his mother thought so. She did not know what to do. Now, there was in the parish of Llanfabon a man who had the reputation of being well informed on matters which are dark to most people. This reputation he had gained by living at a place called the Castle of the Night. This castle had been built of stones from Llanfabon Church and was haunted. Many men had tried to live there, but had been compelled to leave because ghosts plagued them so. That this man was able to dwell there in seeming peace and comfort was proof positive, in the eyes of people of Llanfabon, that he had some control at least over the powers of darkness. The widow went to this wise man and laid her trouble before him. After hearing her story, he said to her, "If you follow my directions faithfully and minutely, I think I shall be able to help you. At noon tomorrow, take an eggshell and prepare to brew some beer in it. See that the boy watches what you are doing, but take care not to tell him to pay attention. He will ask you what you are doing. You are to say, 'I am brewing beer for the harvestmen.' Listen carefully to what he says when he hears that, but pretend not to catch it. After you have put him to bed tomorrow night, come and tell me all about it." The widow returned home, and the next day at noon she followed the cunning man's advice. She took an eggshell and got everything ready for brewing beer. The boy stood by her, watching her as a cat watches a mouse. Presently he asked, "What are you doing, mother?" She said, "I am brewing beer for the harvestmen, boy." Then the boy said quietly to himself, "I am very old this day. I was living before my birth. I remember yonder oak, an acorn in the earth, but I never saw the egg of a hen brewing beer before harvest men." The widow heard what he said, but pretended not to have caught it, and asked, "What did you say, my son?" He said, "Nothing, mother." She then turned round and saw that he was very cross, and the angry expression on his face made him very repulsive to look upon. After she had put him to bed that night, the widow went to the Castle of the Night, as she had been ordered, and soon as she entered, the wise man asked, "Were you able to catch what he said?" "He spoke very quietly to himself," answered the widow, "but I am quite sure that what he said was, 'I am very old this day. I was living before my birth. I remember yonder oak, an acorn in the earth, but I never saw the egg of a hen brewing beer for harvestmen.'" "It is well," said the wise man. "If you follow my directions faithfully and minutely, I think I shall be able to help you. The moon will be full in 4 days, and you must go at midnight to where the 4 roads meet above the ford of the bell. Hide yourself somewhere where you can see everything that comes along any of the roads without being seen yourself. Whatever happens, do not stir or utter a sound. If you do, my plans will be frustrated and your own life will be in danger. Come to me the day after and tell me what you see. By midnight on the appointed day, the widow had concealed herself carefully behind a large bush near the crossroads above the ford of the bell, where she could see everything that came along any of the 4 roads without being seen herself. For a long time there was nothing to be seen or heard. The moon shone brightly, and the melancholy silence of midnight lay over all. Before long, dark clouds obscured the moon, and at last the anxious widow heard the faint sounds of music in the far distance. The strains came nearer and nearer, and she listened with rapt attention. Before long, the melody was close at hand, and she saw a procession of fairies coming along one of the roads. Soon, the vanguard of the procession came up, and she saw that there were hundreds of fairies marching along. They were singing the sweetest songs she had ever heard, and she felt that she could listen to them forever. Just as the middle of the procession came opposite her hiding place, the moon emerged from behind a black cloud, and in the clear, cold light, which then flooded the earth, she beheld a sight which turned her pleasure into bitter pain and made her heart beat almost out of her body. Walking between 2 fairies was her own dear little boy. She nearly forgot herself altogether, and was on the point of springing into the midst of the fairies to snatch her darling away from them. But she remembered in time that the wise man had warned her that his plans would be upset and her own life in danger if she carried out her intention. And controlling herself by supreme effort, she neither stirred nor uttered a sound. When the long procession had wound itself past and the music had died away in the distance, she issued from her concealment and went home to bed. But her heart was so full of longing for her lost child that she never slept a wink all night. On the morrow, she went to the wise man early. He was expecting her, and as she entered, he perceived by her looks that she had seen something to disturb her. She told him what she had witnessed at the crossroads, and he again said, "It is well. If you will follow my directions faithfully and minutely, I think I shall be able to help you." He then brought out a great book, bound in calf skin, opened it and pored long over it. After much deliberation, he said, "You must find a black hen without a single white feather, or one of any other colour than black. Do you burn peat or wood?" "I burn peat," said the widow. "After you have found the hen," resumed the wise man, "you must light a wood fire and bake the hen before it, with its feathers and all intact. If you have placed it to bake before the fire, close every passage and hole in the wall, leaving only the chimney open. After that, avoid looking at the boy, but watch the hen baking and do not take your eyes off it until the last feather has fallen off it. Strange as the directions of the wise man appeared, she determined to follow them as faithfully and as minutely as she had the previous directions. But oh, the weary tramp she had before. She could find a black hen without a single white feather or one of any other colour than black. She tried every farm in the parish of Llanfabon in vain, and she was nearly driven to the conclusion that if this breed of hens had ever existed on earth, it had become extinct. It was weeks before she secured the right hen, and it was at a farm miles away from Llanfabon that she was successful in her search. Her repeated disappointments were all the more bitter because she was forced to hide her disgust with the little fellow who was there instead of her boy. When he addressed her as "Mother," it was almost more than she could bear, but she was just able to make no difference in her behaviour towards him, though he seemed to be getting smaller, crosser and uglier every day. Having found the black hen, she built up a wood fire, and when it was burning brightly, she wrung the hen's neck and placed it as it was, feathers and all, in front of the fire. She then closed every passage and hole in the walls, leaving only the chimney open, and sat in front of the fire to watch the hen baking. The little fellow called to her several times, but though she answered him, she was careful not to look at him. After a bit, she fell into a swoon. When she came out of it, she saw that all the feathers had fallen off the hen, and looking round the house, she saw that the changeling had disappeared. Then she heard the strains of music outside the house, and they were the same as though she had heard at the crossroads. All of a sudden, the music ceased, and she heard the little boy's voice calling, "Mother." She rushed out, and lo and behold, who should be standing within a few paces of the threshold but her own dear little boy? She snatched him up in her arms and almost smothered him with kisses. She laughed and wept in turn, and her joy was greater than words can tell. When asked where he had been all this long while, the little boy had no account to give of himself except that he had been listening to lovely music. He was pale and wan and thin, but under his mother's loving care, he soon became his bonny self again, and mother and son lived happily ever afterwards. So, unlike most of the Welsh fairy stories I tell, this one does actually have a happy ending. So I'm pretty pleased about that. So if you would like to hear more Welsh fairy stories, please do subscribe, give this video a like and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you.